Okay, so here are all the books that I bought. It should be a total of 30 volumes. So, hey everyone, it's been a while since our last update. Today is the day after Mid Autumn Festival, so I thought it would be time for a nice update on my CJK challenge. Spoiler, I haven't done much. So, actually, I've been mostly busy with schoolwork, so I haven't had much time to really do much study, but I do have a whole lot of new books that I bought that I eventually plan to work through. Okay, so here are all the books that I bought. It should be a total of 30 volumes. So, first, for Korean, I have this Yonsei Korean textbook. It's for Mandarin speakers. Yeah, I've actually been trying to work through this a little. I got it based on a recommendation on like the Chinese internet, where they say like, oh, this is the best Korean textbook for Mandarin speakers. But I actually don't find it super useful because it's meant for really for people that are taking Korean classes at Yonsei University, and so I find it doesn't have as many texts as I would like, because by the idea of comprehensible input, it's really about getting a lot of input that is comprehensible, right? And while I find that this has some good passages, it's really not as much as I would like, whereas there are a lot of exercises. And personally, I don't find these exercises very helpful. I just end up skipping them because I just don't I don't think these exercises are useful for me right now, and it's not exactly a priority for me to really get into speaking straight away. Yeah, for me, I do prefer just to work on my understanding first before really getting into speaking. I've really read through this whole first volume pretty quickly because a lot of it are things that I already know. So I'm about midway through the second of the 6 volumes because I already know everything in this first volume. That's why I can go through it very quickly, and the lack of text do not hamper me as much. But when I get to the second volume and it's things that I don't actually know, like I can't just so that's where I find that I'm not really learning because I don't have enough text. I don't have enough passages to really ingrain these new grammatical structures in my head. I feel like I have somewhat mixed reviews of this textbook, but I'll give it a bit more time and see how much I can learn from it. So I'm not sure if I'm sort of expecting too much out of these textbooks, but I definitely do find this is a bit, it's just not as useful even compared to the Japanese textbook. So this 中日交流标准日本语 the new edition, the 新版. So we have this Japanese textbook that I also got based on a recommendation from the Chinese internet, and I quite like this one. I find that it's less exercise heavy and it has more text. It's just based on if I had to estimate, I would say maybe like 1.5 times to 2 times as many texts than the Yonsei Korean textbook. And I find this really, really useful, and there's not much to say about it. I just really like it. So, but at the same time, I haven't worked through as much as I would like. So I'm not even through really the first volume. So the difference is because the Yonsei textbook is, I just skip through all the exercises so I can go through it extremely quickly. Whereas this one, there are more readings, and so it's really taking me more time to really look through. It's ironic because I feel that my Japanese is actually much better than my Korean, because my finals thesis is on this school of Buddhism called Tiantai, or like Tendai in Japanese. So I also tried to look through some articles in Japanese, and I find that actually I have a pretty high comprehension of what's going on. I think it's because all the kanji are the same as the Chinese characters, right? The Hanzi. And so at least for the key terms, I can pretty instantly recognize what they're talking about. And for the grammatical parts, I think they're quite straightforward. It's more of a formal manner of speech. And so ironically, academic reading is pretty straightforward for me in Japanese. Whereas for Korean, I feel like I'm still a long way away. Yeah, I do think my Japanese is, overall my Japanese is much better simply because I've been sort of getting more content in my head, and also just having that crutch of kanji being present in the writing. But I do realize that without the kanji, without the written aspect, I do have a lot of trouble. So I think I was in a conversation once in Japanese, and I just like, even though I knew all the words, but I just couldn't understand what was being said because I'm so used to seeing things with subtitles below, you know. So without the aid of the kanji, I do find that I have some difficulties, and I think that's something I want to work on. So I'm trying to get more input without subtitles at all. So really just watching shows that I already understand and know, and without subtitles. We'll have to see how this goes. Like, I haven't had much time to watch much shows, so but I will try to make more time to really work on my Japanese. And as for Korean, I found this really interesting hack. I guess a hack that only works for me. As you may know, I'm really a student of, let's say, East Asian classics in university. So I am quite familiar with the texts of Confucius and so on. So one of our viewers, Shouri, actually recommended a really interesting channel, which is called Walloon Language Institute. I'll link in the description below. They're really interesting. They essentially take these classical texts and they read it out in the Korean pronunciation. So reading out the Hanja. And I find this like really, really useful because one big problem I have with Korean is that I can't recognize the characters. So as you know, they don't use the Hanja in normal writing, right? They just use like the Hangul. And so even if there are words that like I know in the other languages, I can't make the connection as quickly because there isn't the really just the Hanja there for me to pick up on. So one skill I'm trying to work on is really to learn to recognize what characters they are, what characters are there within the Korean sentences. And sort of a weird way I found to do this is by watching these videos by Warren, because they have one series where they go through this basically is this famous commentary of the 4 books, the Confucian classics, right? So I have this physical copy, and it's really interesting because essentially he just he reads out the passages from the Analects and then he explains it in Korean. So luckily for me, I already know what the passages mean, and I remember the passages, right? So it's helpful for me when he reads out these passages, and I really get to hear the Korean readings of the Hanja. So that helps me build the link between like the sounds and the characters themselves. And then afterwards, because he explains the meanings of each passage, and he explains it in Korean. So I already know the meanings of this passage. So so in a weird way, I'm learning Korean through classical Chinese. So very strange approach, but it's kind of working well for me. I do want to put more time into really watching these videos. So but I'm very thankful that that someone like him is really producing these videos, and do check it out. He also produces like videos on our 808 characters. I think he does go into quite a bit more details than we do in terms of like how it's written. So I think it's really worth checking out if you understand Korean as well. Finally, maybe for classical Chinese, I also have this really famous classical Chinese textbook called 古代汉语. So these are the textbooks that they use in China to learn at the college level to teach classical Chinese. So to be honest, I haven't had much time to look at it, but I've really just been, even just for my research, I've been reading quite a bit of classical Chinese, so I'm not too worried about that, but I would like to take some time to really work through this. Yeah, on that topic, I've been growing more interested in the way Japanese and Koreans read classical Chinese. So I know in Japanese it's kanbun and Korean is hanmun. If there are any of you out there who can point me to some resources about how classical Chinese is traditionally read in these two countries, these two traditions, I would really appreciate it, because I think it would be super interesting to do like a comparative view of how classical Chinese was used and understood and in these different countries. And also it would be really nice if someone could eventually develop a classical Chinese course that respects the the long traditions of learning in all these different countries, because right now it's very like Mandarin centric, let's say, where you learn classical Chinese and you always read it out in the Mandarin pronunciation. But in history, we know that that's not so, because there are just everyone reads it out in their own the different dialects will read it out in their own way, and Japanese will read it out in their own way, Koreans will read it out in their own way. Any of you know anything about that, I would really, really appreciate if you could share that with me. And I guess finally, just would like to point you all to our new Discord server. So it's public, and all of you can join if you want to really come and talk about CJK stuff. So I'm not really good at all this Discord stuff, so I probably won't be too active, but I hope at least it will be a nice space for people with the same interests to come and gather and share their thoughts and resources. So please do check out our Discord channel, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do find these videos interesting or helpful, please also consider looking at our Patreon page. So all of that will be linked in the description below. Thank you for coming on this journey, and hope you had a great Mid-Autumn festival. All right, thank you.